Hello everyone, my name's Lee Fisher and I look after the Juniper Security Business in EMEA. What we're going to be talking about today is rethinking security models and the fact that we've got a lot of evidence behind us today that points out how today's security models and what we've adopted over the last sort of 15 or 20 years currently is ineffective and doesn't work as well as it should do anymore. So if we look across all of the different types of security technologies and approaches that we take, a lot of them are rooted fundamentally in what used to work in the past. And the sad fact is that most of those models today are ineffective. They don't work as they used to do in the past, and they're no longer as effective. So if we think about explaining why that may well be, let's just examine some of the evidence around it. And I don't think we can avoid that situation anymore and sort of trying to pretend it doesn't exist. If we took a look at a couple of examples, there's WannaCry, and WannaCry affected a lot of organizations across the globe in terms of it attacked everyone. That was basically a problem of doing the basics properly. You've got Equifax, another large organization that really should have been knowing to be doing its basics better. And also organizations as varied as Hilton Hotels or Zomato or Uber. These are day-to-day types of activities that we see in the threat industry today of organizations that have suffered some form of cyber attack or data breach. Why is it happening? What's different? Why are we facing these scenarios day after day? How long is it going to take for the industry to recognize that there's something that we need to do that's different? And I don't think that we can choose to ignore that evidence for much longer. And when I go out and talk to customers, normally what I find is that there's normally one of 4 problems that usually come up, and usually all of them, by the way. And the first is what we'll call untargeted threats. And that's the nature of a type of threat that wasn't originally designed to attack any one specific organization. It's a bit like a plague of locusts. These attacks come and they're designed to hurt anybody that happens to get in the way. And what we see is like a plague of locusts is that you're fine as long as you're not directly in that line of sight or you get attacked or you're underneath those locusts. It's getting that attack inside your organization that leads to a problem. And what we've got to remember in this scenario is these are threats that are not written for you, they're written by machines, for machines that your organization happens to use. It's a much wider attack base that they're looking to exploit and leverage to get inside any organization. And absolutely, once it's usually running inside an organization today, then the specific attack relative to the type of organization that it finds itself running within can start. But it's only up until that point where it's any different from anyone else. We all suffer these same types of threats, and that's because they're made for the mass market, if you will. About 95, 98% of all threats are generic in the sense of who they were originally written for. And it's this sheer volume of threats that we see that really stand out as a sort of deliberate reaction on part of the cyber criminal fraternity as a direct consequence of the type of security models that we've learned to adopt over the last 20 years. A sheer scale is a deliberate tactic on their part to keep in front of your defenses. So this pins you as an organization to leveraging technologies which require constant updates to keep in front of the nature of the type of attack that we see. And the reality is, the odds are fundamentally stacked against you. The bad guy has only really got to get this right once for their threat to actually work within your organization. You've got to get it right every single time. The truth is, they're faster than you. We can't keep up. The cyber criminals do not have the same type of challenges that you do in ensuring that your organization keeps on top of all of those security products that you're using. They haven't got to worry about quality of service. They haven't got to worry about affecting the HR department or the chief executives who can't get their email anymore. They don't have the same challenges that you do in ensuring that something runs everywhere. They just write it, fire it out there, get it out there, it's gone. Their focus is much sharper than what yours is. They don't have to worry about the same types of issues. And the reality is, you can't keep up with them unless you adopt automation in terms of a defense model. And a final point on this, if we look at the the diversity, the stealth capabilities and the complexity of malware that's written today, then realize all this actually amounts to are digital masks. They're masks intended to hide what it is that's actually underneath this code. For each family of malware viruses or threats that we see, there are usually thousands of individual samples or variations on that same theme, all written, of course, by robots rather than people. And again, this is a deliberate attempt to appear safe to those defense models that you've adopted. And it's designed to avoid detection by traditional security solutions. The reality here and what I'm trying to suggest to you is that most security solutions that we've adopted over the last 20 years use the concept of time-based security models to protect your business. That's providing the time to build up the knowledge to understand that something is bad, and therefore using that knowledge to provide an update of some kind that can be deployed inside your organization. What that's doing is effectively handing over the benefit of time to the cyber criminal. They can weaponize time against you so that you are always on the back foot. What we should be doing is changing our approach and leveraging time for your own benefit, such that we should be starting to focus on behavior and understanding what's normal, spending the time to understand what's normal, to improve your security rather than using it as a weapon against you. The second theme that I normally find when I'm talking to customers is they're not so worried maybe about the generic attacks or untargeted threats. What they're worried about are targeted issues. So threats that have been specifically designed to target them. And here's the sad news. The reality is that if your organization is targeted by a group of serious cyber criminals, wherever they happen to be it in the Far East or in Eastern Europe or in Southern America, it doesn't matter. The point is they're likely to be successful if they're serious enough. They will make the effort to understand the who, the what, the how your organization protects itself. Today's targeted attacks are usually written in mind of the types of defenses that are being deployed inside customer environments. They're designed to bypass today's traditional defenses, and sophisticated attacks will anticipate the type of security models that organizations are using. Actually, more than that. What we find, and if you think about this analogy, is if we look at socially engineered threats, so things like someone's targeting your organization with a phishing attack, they've taken the effort to identify the relevant people in relevant departments with a relevant message inside your organization. Well, if you accept that that's happening today, all the time, then think that that's just the tip of the iceberg. What we're seeing is that they're using the same techniques, the same understanding to map out the business in terms of the technologies that are being used as well. And here's the truth. The security industry has an Achilles heel today. And that Achilles heel is the fact that all security industry vendors are commercial organizations, and they have a product to sell. To sell that product, they need to make it available for you and your organization to test it. If only we could think of a way of making sure that the good guys get this technology in their hands. And the sad fact is we can't. The bad guys get hold of it too. And that means is that they can actually experiment with their bad things that they're writing against that same technology base. And guess what? If they don't have the skills themselves to do that, they can go and hire it from the dark web for $2 a day. Incredible. And this is the Achilles heel that we have to accept. Failure to accept that that's a reality today leads to all sorts of problems for us in the future. When you consider the way that organizations have leveraged data in the past, they're baby steps. The way that data is going to change the way that we live our lives and buy products and get to A to B is going to be fundamentally different in the next 10 to 15 years. So we cannot rely on that outdated security model to protect our organizations. And here's the fact. Off-the-shelf security solutions will not be effective in the future at preventing an attack that's designed to run inside your organization. Period. The old way of doing it is soon running out of steam. Defense models that are based on the ability to detect problems based on a knowledge of what is bad, they're going to end soon in terms of it being a primary means of defense. We need to be shifting our defenses to a behavioral-based detection so that we're looking at problems based on a knowledge of what's normal. And that changes the entire perspective for us. So what is it that every organization has in its back pocket that a criminal can't access, that isn't available to download at all, and for them to test against? That secret source is your information. Information that's buried inside your business today. And the analogy I'd like to use is nobody knows your body better than you. We know when we're ill. The signals are inside our body. We feel hot, sweaty, clammy. We have a headache. We feel lethargic. Those signals are interpreted by us and the brain as I'm not feeling very well. Well, guess what? That same telemetry exists inside a business today, if we choose to listen to it. If you start to map out the applications, the users, the logs, the way that we use and when and how we use networks, and all of the data sets that are being created and the data mountains that we're taking in and recording across the business today, that builds up a unique fingerprint, a unique digital fingerprint of your organization. We should be using that as a means of understanding what's normal inside the business. And it's unique for every single one of us. If you think about it, across your organization, there'll be hundreds of untapped sources of information for you to use. Some of it will come from traditional security products. Some of it won't. It will come from application logs and flow data and other aspects. Information that can give you signals, intelligence, telemetry from your business that says, this is normal. The clues are there, it's just whether or not we're listening. And for the first time in history, we've really reached the point where machine learning can help mankind in that sense, to actually identify what's normal inside it, to take that strain away from us as people, to be able to help and identify those patterns of normality. So we're starting to get to the point where business can, for the first time, start to use its data not as a risk, but as an asset to understand what's normal, using the data within the business to protect itself. Because once you know what's normal, you can start to model against that normality based on the behavioral changes and then determine how to respond as a result of that. This is an effort of turning the data that you have and you're already collecting into wisdom so that you can make better choices in terms of securing the organization going forwards. So the third part is let's look at the environment around us in terms of the devices that we're using. Now, a lot of organizations talk to people today around the role of Internet of Things. Well, what is a thing? What are we going to be placing onto networks in the future? Is it the clothing that you wear? Is it a sensor in a pair of glasses or spectacles? Is it going to be a sensor in the room, a beacon that listens to the temperature or the fact that the lighting's controlled? Is it something else that drives a business in terms of its pumps or manufacturing equipment? Is it something that I'll be using in self-driving automated cars? The platform, the compute platform, and the abilities of that platform will vary from one to the next. So providing a security model around that is quite difficult. Now contrast that for the moment against the world of the security industry and think about what it means to most of the security vendors when we talk about endpoint protection. Endpoint protection is there and available today, as long as it's Wintel or maybe a little bit of Apple Macintosh. That's not sufficient in the future going forwards. There's already more devices talking to the internet than there are people on the planet. So we need to start to think about this in a different context. There's more devices than people. And we need to move away our shift of thinking about what and how is actually accessing the network. So providing security for that, there's no consistent model. We've got to find a consistent model in the types of devices and assets that are going to be talking to the network. And the truth is, these attacks have already started as well. You know, Mirai or some hacking cases that I could talk about from the context of what we saw last year, where a casino was hacked by an internal IoT-enabled fish tank, or a college that was actually attacked from its point of sale machines inside the campus that started to attack the actual lighting systems across all of the campus facilities. The nature of attacks is moving away from where we watch. No one's watching these devices. Nobody's monitoring them. Nobody's aware of what type of security they should be providing around them. Nobody knows how to fix it when it goes wrong. There's no one watching. So ask yourself seriously, to a criminal, would I rather go after the devices where there's a piece of human squidgy soft thing in the middle, which I'm reliant on him double clicking on something, or would I rather automate this via a machine attack? I know what I'd be doing in the future. And it's not just the IoT world in the sense of actually, you know, corporate life or business life or even out in the consumer land. We're talking about Internet of Things in the industrialized cell, industrialized control surfaces and so on. And here, this is where the real problem comes, because what we're talking about is manufacturers that are moving their operationalized technologies onto IT. And with doing so, there are inherent risks of bringing that into that environment as well. It's got to be much more sophisticated than just segmenting those networks. How are they going to deliver that cost and efficiency savings to the business if all that they do is then bring down their manufacturing by doing so? And if you are a manufacturer who's providing a smart enabled type of device to a consumer, what are you doing in terms of the level of protection that you're putting around that device? Are you just hardening it and hoping for the best? Ultimately, time and history has told us that's not sufficient. When that attack happens on those devices, what privacy controls have we got to think about for the consumer of those products? What are we doing in terms of the ability to provide protection back for your infrastructure as a result of attacking an end user in their home? And what happens to the rest of the ecosystem of all those other users using those devices too? Every technology platform is changing, and it's here where we see another dynamic changing. It's not just the devices either. The whole environment around where applications are run, what type of clouds they're running in, where I access them, how I access them, all of that is changing. The only consistent we're going to be seeing in the future is actually that they all need a network. So let's start to leverage that as a means of actually providing protection. And the final piece that I normally talk to customers about is this one, you know, the lack of time and skills across the organizations that we have in terms of cybersecurity. Most people, when I know we actually started out in a cybersecurity career, thought they were going to be some form of digital James Bond, you know, some sort of super spy, stealth spy. Well, the truth is, the job has not turned out like that. It's keeping on top of their own skill sets a challenge, understanding where the business is going is a challenge, understanding what they need to be protecting in the future is a challenge, and keeping on top of your basic skill set as a security operations specialist is difficult today. And not only that, it's forecast that there's just not enough of us to go around. So in terms of people doing this work in the future, we're either going to be training a lot of people over the next 10 years to fill these roles, or we're going to have to look at some other way of making sure that the business can scale out and be efficient here. Because we've got a staff shortage issue to deal with in terms of the skills and number of people doing this work. There's plenty of work going around, you know. I haven't met yet the security operations team with little things to do in the day. There's plenty of plates to metaphorically be spinning. And of course, while they're doing that, we've said this before, what will happen is essentially your team gets caught in the day-to-day keeping the lights on of maintaining security products rather than improving the actual security posture of the business. So to finalize on this point, think about what we can do in 191 days. Turns out you can do quite a lot. We can go on a luxury cruise around the world, or you know, it's a football season or a rugby season. And if you're Elon Musk, you'd be interested to know that it takes 180 days to send your spaceship with a Tesla car in it to Mars. The sad fact is, though, all of those are put into contrast when you say it takes 191 days for the average organization to identify that it has had a data breach. That's shocking. And frankly, we need to change that. The fact that an organization doesn't on average know about something for maybe 9 months before, that is a statistic that I'm not happy with, and as an industry we need to do something about. Security teams need actionable insights. They've got to clear through that noise. The reason it's 191 days is just too many things to keep them occupied. We need to enable a team to focus on the 4 things that matter today, not the 1 million things that don't. So what approach are Juniper taking? Actually, it comes down to 3 simple things. Firstly, it's about helping organizations analyze behavior, understand normality inside their business, help them form that picture of what is day-to-day normal activity across their infrastructure and their environment, collect that unique data and start to make sense of it, and start to unlock the combined power of all of the security solutions into one as a result of doing it. Secondly, once you've analysed that behaviour, give me the means of actually providing an automated response to that at some level that makes effective efficiencies of what I was trying to do in terms of the security modelling. And that's across the network. So enforce across the entire business domain, network domain. So the only consistent enforcement point we've said before is going to be the network. That's embedding and simplifying the policies that enable you to do that. Leverage not just firewalls, but routers and switching technology too. And of course, some from our competitors as well. It's time to start and leverage the network. And the final piece, automate. As we've said before, we as humans can't keep up with the machine in doing a specific dedicated task. So split it up. Let the machine do what it's good at doing and let the people do what they're good at doing. And allow the people to focus, instead of maintaining security, to improve it for your organization. And we do that via an intelligent, automated, secure network platform. The ability to gather information from disparate systems to help you form a picture of what's normal. And then to use that to drive policies back across your network to say, well, this has changed, what do I do in response? And then leveraging the network, the switches, the routers, and the firewalls to be able to protect your organization. It's time to think the role of the network. Thank you very much for your time.